So thank you everyone for attending and giving up your Friday afternoon. Hopefully you picked a great venue that you can cool off from the weather we've been having outside on the patio afterwards, where we'll have some food and drinks after the speakers are done. So I'm Michelle Landis. I'm the chair of the ASLA Stewardship Committee. And I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, parking. There's some areas that were roped off and coned off, so if you've parked in that area, we'll need you to move your car. The Yacht Club has an event that they're going to start parking people for later this afternoon. So there's free parking across the street, and there's a limited number in this lot, but we're trying to keep those open for the Yacht Club members too. This is a no smoking and no vaping facility. So that includes in front of the building and the patios. So if you need to smoke, you got to go a little bit further out. The Yacht Club asks that you not wander around upstairs. That's their members only area. It is a really cool facility. I'm sure they'd be happy to give you a tour if you're interested in learning more about the facility. And in fact, Angela, who's sitting in the back corner, is our sponsor at the Yacht Club. And she's very kind to let us host our events at this beautiful facility, and I'm sure she can arrange a tour for you if you want to see more of this beautiful building they've built like 3 years ago, I think? 4 years ago. There's restrooms across the hallway. Do they need a key? No, it's unlocked. Okay. So right across the hall, and I think that's it for that. So I want to talk a couple minutes about the Stewardship Committee. And some of you who are not ASLA members might be a little confused by that term. So we call ourselves the Stewardship Committee because the father of landscape architect is considered Frederick Law Olmsted, and he talked about us needing to be good stewards of the land. So we like to say we've been doing sustainability for over 100 years. So it's really just a kind of an old-fashioned term for sustainability. Marion Marham was our first chairperson and started this company, and I don't see Marion here yet. But the goal of this committee is to bring kind of multi-viewpoints together. So when we start to see issues arise in the landscape and development process, that we can all work together, get those viewpoints out in the open so that we can resolve that and continually educate ourselves to this ever-changing environment and wonderful environment that we live in. So we're hoping that this is going to be the first in our Sustainable Strategies series. If you're interested in being a Stewardship Committee member, we're always happy to add new people to the roster. It does take quite a bit of work to throw these. So I'd like to have our Stewardship Committee members stand up and give them a little recognition for all the hard work they've done. Thank you guys. Awesome. And we try to always distribute announcements to these events, kind of multidisciplinary, and you know, we see a great showing of some of our municipal colleagues. But if you want us to reach you more readily, please feel free to get a hold of one of us and give us your email, and we'll make sure to get you on that master list so we can get you directly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kemp. Brian we're very fortunate to have him down here. He's flown down from Visalia early this morning, and he's done some amazing work at getting a lot of resources related to trees and how to specify proper trees, how to grow proper trees. So, this to you, and I'm going to get your...
Hi. It's great to be in San Diego. Unfortunately, I have to fly back to the Central Valley this evening, which is probably about 106 at home. Somebody said, why the hell are you going home? But I also work at the construction of the new Apple campus in Cupertino, and so I'm gone 4 days a week, so anytime I can be home is great. Everybody, I think, got a book and cue cards. We're going to be talking about pruning today as it relates from the nursery all the way up into the landscape. This book was paid for through a grant from CAL FIRE. I'm the director of the Urban Tree Foundation, but I'm also a principal or a partner in a firm called Wood Architecture, which is landscape architecture, horticulture, arboriculture, and agriculture. And we started a program trying to improve the quality of nursery stock for the state of California about 15 years ago. Is this thing, is okay? Okay. And I've known Jim Barnes for, I don't know, 15 years or so. And we've worked together for quite some time. And the goal was to improve the state of trees grown here and get all the disciplines on the same page. And what I thought was really cool about this group is that you're from different disciplines. And that's really a neat thing. And the landscape industry tends to be a bit siloed. And so this group's doing good things by putting everybody in the same room. So this example, happens to be a detail. And up on the internet, it's at Land Effects, it's at ISA, it's at Urban Tree. There are CAD details and specifications that deal with all of landscape as well as tree quality that are open and free to use. And this is a book that we wrote that you can take home, and some cue cards. Notice this, and I'm going to screw this up. Which one's the pointer?
The middle.
Perfect. This is a Corcus agrifolia. Does that look like it's good pruning? How many tree folks work with trees for a living here? Couple? How many landscape architects? Quite a few. Municipal inspectors? Couple. Municipalities? Okay, that's a good group of folks. So yeah, this is not what a young Corcus agrifolia looks like, hopefully, but it does happen at times. So we're going to talk about, there we go. And I'm going to do that several times, folks. I'm going to screw up the presentation several times. What we're talking about today is central leaders and versus codominant stems. This is a Corcus virginiana, or southern live oak. And this is a Corcus virginiana southern live oak. Notice they're both round. Notice they have totally different structure. Why would this be a problem in a parking lot?
Easy breakage of the limbs.
Easy breakage of the limbs. That's correct. So this is my daughter Hannah, and this is Visalia, and this is a Corcus agrifolia with a central leader. And you'll see this is also a root experiment, and you'll see that at the top of this particular tree we have what's called a codominant scaffold, or a branch that is the same as the leader. So this is the dominant leader, this is a codominant leader. And I'm going to use a term called aspect ratio. Has anybody heard the term aspect ratio? It's new, Jim, of course. Aspect ratio is the size of branch in relation to the trunk. And a good structured tree has small aspect ratio branches that are half the size of what they're attached to, and that is desirable. So you can see this actually has a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. That is not desirable. It's not the size of branch, but it's not the, how do I say this? Small branches with large aspect ratio are issues. You can see this is a 1-to-1. And so how do you control that sort of thing from a pruning perspective? And Jim would focus on this sort of thing to maintain a leader in the nursery. And you can see that I've subordinated this branch by reducing it by half. I've cut it to a bud away from the central leader. And you can see the plant responded and pushed the branch out, but the important part is that it slows the growth. Slows the growth on the branch. And you can see from 2012 to 2014, we've reduced the aspect ratio by 50%. You can see that there. So you can see you've subordinated that over a period of time. Do these trees look any different than normal in that there's temporary branches? So my wife, who likes trees, but said, I can't see the front door, I may limb the trees up. What do you notice about the size of cuts there? they're small, right? They're small cuts. In arboriculture, you don't want to make big cuts on the trunk. By subordinating the branches, I'm able to maintain a small aspect ratio and raise the trees up. Anybody been to a parking lot where they cut the trees off to see signs, right? And they whack them off and they whack them off and they whack them off. At a city, what is your first permanent scaffold branch on the street?
8 feet
8 feet on the sidewalk, street side?
on sidewalk and 14 feet on the roadway.
Correct. Branches stay where they are on the tree and grow larger in diameter if they don't grow up with the tree. So when you plant a young tree that's 7 feet tall, those are really often temporary branches. By keeping those branches in check and keeping them subordinated, you can raise the tree up. And one of the things that happens, and this isn't a nursery, but this happens, or this is historic nursery sort of practices where trees are topped. And nurserymen top trees to branch them. Some trees don't produce branches like, for instance, a jacaranda. Doesn't branch well. If you grow a jacaranda without heading it, it probably won't branch and people won't necessarily buy it. So this was actually done by a gardener. See the heading cuts there? So what I did is I selected a new central leader and subordinated the branches so we can push the leader up. And you can see before and after. Now we reduced a lot of leaf area, right? A lot of leaf area. And ISA says you're not supposed to remove more than 20% of the foliage at any one given time. And that is true on a mature tree. That's not necessarily true on a young tree. And you can see the tree kept growing, growing, and that's where the heading cut was, and that's where the tree ultimately developed. Now, if I hadn't made those cuts, you'd have all your branches growing from one point. And that distributes the weight to one point, which leads to structural defects. You see. So, most important thing to know is branches stay in the same place and grow larger in diameter. They do not grow up with the tree. When you understand that concept, then you can look at where you want the branches in the landscape. A lot of people believe that this branch magically grows up. And what you want for the first permanent scaffold branch is based on the plant's use in the landscape. This works in a front yard, it's not going to work here. So if this tree was planted at this height, none of the branches on this tree at planting exist. So in a nursery setting, what you want is you want a good, strong central leader and temporary branches. Anybody know why you'd want temporary branches?
Develop cheaper and increase the growth of the main trunk.
That's right. More leaves means more food, particularly in the young sizes. And people want the young trees to look like a mature tree. You'll notice the nursery industry was driven to limb trees up, cut the tops off, and round them over. And that leads to structural problems, and that's because people's beliefs that young trees need to look like mature trees. This is really ideal in, say, a number 5 or 5 gallon tree where you have all the branches to the ground. I hear that that's a big problem for the buying community to see branches they want to see trunk. So this is downtown Visalia, and we planted 2,500 street trees. And you'll notice there's temporary branches along the trunk, or leaflets. Within 8 years, we were able to train the tree up above signage. So that was really good. Now this is Visalia Community Bank, and this was planted in 1990 when I was a senior in high school. And this is what nurseries used to do, and I pulled this picture off of the internet, so it's fuzzy and crappy, but I don't have many pictures from 1990. I didn't pay attention to trees when I was a senior in high school. But anyway, this was the historic nursery practices, and Jim will tell you this is how it was always done, where all the branches were removed to 7 feet, the top cut off, and the tree rounded over. And you see these lollipop trees like in the first photo of the Quercus agrifolia. This is more what I would plant with a strong central leader and temporary branches along the trunk. This tree is this tree. So does anyone know what's going on? I realize that there's not a lot of folks that work in arboriculture, which deals with the structure, but does anybody know what sort of problem there is there? Recrotch, there you go. Bad structure, right? So what you have here is a bark inclusion. And what a bark inclusion is there's no connective tissue at the top of the union. So this is the strongest angle in nature. They use it in car doors and airplanes. When you have a misfire, you get bark that embeds at the top of the union, and that's why you see trees fail. So that comes often from the nursery heading cuts. And that's why this is a big deal and why we specify trees shall have a central leader. Because this defect that developed at the nursery. And then was pruned by Parker plumbing truck because the scaffolds were too low. See that? Now, when you're buying a tree, you buy time, right? So a number 15 costs $48 to $50. A 24-inch is $160, 36, or so on and so forth, to where you're buying time. How much time did I lose? This tree is probably 10 to 15 years old. What's the economic loss to the poor structure that happened at planting and wasn't dealt with? So all the trees around that building were all the same. These are all trees that I planted in about 2010. And you can see they're both round. This is, one's grown, not 2000, sorry, 2000, not 2010. These were planted in 1990, these were planted in 2000. And both trees are round, but notice the structure is totally different, where these have codominant branches and the branches start a lot lower. And you can see codominant branches. See the height of the first permanent branch. Now notice we've kept the aspect ratio of the branches small. This one is probably too large, and I would have liked to subordinate that one more aggressively, but I was learning as I was doing. We prune the trees once a year for the first 10 years, all of them, and we would go through to get the scaffolds above signage because clearance is an issue. Anybody been to downtown San Diego? See the jacarandas getting torn up by everything, the branches starting at this height? What happened on many of those trees is they were planted from the nursery where they were branched at 7 feet and nobody trained them. So, and it has to continue for 10 or 15 years until you get your clearance. You can see here's a reduction cut here, and we continue on and then pretty much let the tree go. This is a form of pruning called lion's tailing. Does anybody know what lion's tailing is? I know Sam. Lion's tailing is a pruning practice where the inside of the foliage is stripped and left outside of the foliage left alone. It's really bad. It's a bad pruning practice, lion's tailing. It's not recommended. And what you'll notice by lion's tailing, it's pushing the growth out past the crown of the tree. See how that's out here like this? It causes structural stress at that union. And you can see by trying to clear the sign, because Visalia Community Bank pays money to have a sign here, and anybody who works in the planning department will tell you you only get that one sign in that location, and they pay money for that. So we clear it this way. It's not a good way to clear. A good way to make clearance is a strong central leader and being able to raise the trees above signage. And see, these trees are about 10 years apart. They're both round. They have totally different structure, but the outside form is identical. And you can see, here's the branches. This is my lovely wife, Sandra, planting this tree. There's where the branches were. So ultimately, we removed the nursery crown. So hopefully we get it right the second time. And you want to avoid these defects that heading causes without retaining a central leader. So we're going to get into, it's okay to head the tree if you retain a central leader. How many people want to buy that one? Who runs to the store and says, I want the Linus tree? Like, give me the Linus one, right? So this is what's driven our cultural practices to leads to bad structure, because the structure of trees in California that are planted are very poor in general. And as you learn more about it, we'll drive around and look at stuff and say, oh no. But so a lot of trees, jacarandas, Chinese pistache, will not throw a permanent scaffold branch. So the nurseries head them. When you head them, it breaks the auxin and forces branching to develop. So it's a sellable product. This will turn into a really good tree, believe it or not. The Linus tree is a good tree, but it's not sellable. This is a Raywood ash, and you can see the heading cut that was made here. And notice all the branches have gone upright. And the branches stay in the same place and grow larger in diameter. Is there enough room? And this tree gets to be, 3 feet caliper. Is there enough room for 1, 2, 3, 4 branches all in that space? Is it going to fit? No, it's going to turn into this, right? This is a bark inclusion. And if you look really closely, you'll see this tree is bolted together, right? So I got called in to look at this situation. It's a city, and the mayor loves his trees. Loves, loves, loves the trees. And I said, okay, this is great, but you're going to cut them all down. What are you talking about? You're the tree person who brought you in to look at the trees. That's right, you got to cut them down. Because a good attorney, if this fails, because trees don't heal, they do what's called compartmentalize. They compartmentalize around wounds. And you're ultimately going to get some decay in this, and sure enough, it's going to pull this bolt through, and it's probably going to happen when Mr. and Mrs. Jones are walking down the street, and the good attorney is going to say, well, you knew there was a problem because you bolted it together. This can't be fixed at this stage. It can be fixed at this stage. So this can lead to this. And that's why, folks, the municipal inspectors that are saying, I need a tree with a central leader, that's what they're talking about. Because there's only so much you can train this defect out, but after years 3 or 4 after planting, you're not going to train it out. You're stuck. Your structure is stuck. So you can head the tree. So there is some misconceptions. Heading or is topping, and we're referring to that subject matter. We're talking about 1/2-inch wood, 1-inch wood. We're not talking about topping an 8-inch cut on a mature tree. Those are very different things. You have heartwood and sapwood. And when the tree is young, it does not have the heartwood. Sapwood does not decay. So heading the young tree to branch it, which is a common practice, correct? And not an undesirable practice, provided the central leader is retained. And this is Brightview, which was Valley Crest. They just happened. And this is J. Frank Schmidt and Son in Oregon. And you can see this line right here? That's where a heading cut took place. This is a Gladitsia. They don't like to branch. They would have been the Linus tree that none of you would have spec'd. It has shown up on the job site, and you said, no way. So it's got to have branches. So it's headed here, and then these branches are cut back to buds away from the central leader to subordinate the growth, to keep a small aspect ratio so they don't become codominant stems. Does that make sense? And we use bamboo to pull them up to have a nice, straight, sellable, marketable plant. And if this is a street tree in downtown San Diego, first permanent scaffold branch is up here, meaning it doesn't exist yet. You remove them. If this is in your yard, this is about 7 feet, you can have a 7-foot branch tree. So, Bradford pear. Do we have those in San Diego? Anybody ever see one break? Because they break a lot. Bradford pear is a plant that the industry has destroyed by heading. It's genetically predisposed to bad unions. When you cut the top off and walk away, you end up with this sort of thing. And all of these branches, there's not enough space in this area. and you'll get structural defects. This is a Bradford pear unheaded, left alone. Notice they're small aspect ratio branches, meaning the branches are small compared to the trunk. This is one headed. This is one that was headed and then a central leader retained. These two are both desirable. This one is not. This tree and this tree are the same trees. We just did corrective pruning. So in the specifications and details that we put out at the ISA, which are designed for landscape architects, it says in the crown observation that you should have a central leader and that this is okay. And you have the option to request that this be made into this if you can't get them. Now, if you can find a landscape contractor that knows how to do that, that would be a good thing. But it's not out there in the industry. It's better to call your nursery and provide them a set of specifications and let them know what you want. So to show kind of how this works and what kind of drives this stuff culturally, again, I planted a lot of trees in the downtown. This is a Quercus suber, and people would break them, and I would get angry that I'd be out there watering these damn things at 4 in the morning and someone would break one. And so I got sick of it. So I started just cutting them in half below where the break was. And then I would select a new shoot right here. See, I cut that there after someone broke it, selected a new shoot. This is 6 months after that heading cut. This is a full year after that heading cut. This is what the tree looked like at the end of the season. Looks pretty good. We like temporary branches. Temporary branches, which is just a branch that's going to be removed at some point, leave more leaf area. We keep them in check, but we like to protect the trunk and more growth. And then the very well-meaning landscape gardener makes a removal cut to a branch growing down. So they top the tree to a branch going down. Why would they do that? Because they think the tree is supposed to be round. And magically, this turns into a crown. So the cultural practices drive that round structure. Young trees look more like shrubs, pyramids, ideally. They don't look round when they're young. This is a Quercus suber. This is a big round tree at maturity. So I cut the branches back, pulled up a central leader, retrained the plant over a period of time. Here it is. That's where the first heading cut was. The second one's up here. And that's what the tree looks like. If I'd left that tree alone, it would have had a terrible structural defect. So aside from purchasing or specifying a good structured tree, advocating, because landscape architects often do maintenance plans and they have direct contact with the owner. Waiting till year 15 to go in and develop the structure is not going to get it there. It's cheaper to prune a small tree than a big tree. We should be investing in the first 10 years and then maintaining our clearance, leaving things alone. We tend to let it go for 15 years and then you have a structural problem that you can't solve. So this is kind of why this whole slide set of why I think I was asked to come here is there's some disagreement amongst the industry on central leaders and whether a tree can be headed or not. Central leaders are really good for trees, for particularly large growing shade trees. It is okay to head them. What is most important is that a new leader is retained and branches subordinated. So the nursery person makes a sellable plant that is structurally sound. So you can see good structure. These are both platanus. You can see this large aspect ratio branch, these two have choked out the leader, and this is no good. Notice these are smaller than what they're attached to in well space. This is very desirable. This is a before and after. And this is real tree. This is a Pistachia chinensis and part of the training process. And my wife called me one day and said, hey, they pruned your tree. And so I went there and I said, oh, shoot, signage, and I should have got it up higher earlier. And so I went in there and the cook went after it. So they did a pretty good job. So I called Sandra back and I said, I pruned it. Looks good, right? But, believe it or not, it regrew. Because heartwood and sapwood are different, right? Heartwood can decay, sapwood can't. At this stage, there is no sapwood. My point of this is I headed the tree fairly aggressively. It's not the heading cut that's the problem, it's the not retraining the tree that's the problem. And over a period of time, selected the leader, subordinated the branches, see the reduction cut to branches going away, some removal cuts of big branches, and over a period of time, this is Tyson again in my office, and tree looked pretty good. So it's the heading of the leader that when I first started this working to get nurseries to grow central leaders, we thought, well, if you head the tree, you ruin it. That's absolutely not true. Nurseries have to or often need to head certain trees of certain species to make a sellable plant. The key is retraining the central leader and avoiding these large aspect ratio branches. You'll see this is a small branch here, big branch here. This is a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. This is a 0.5 aspect ratio. Notice there's a reduction of caliper from here to here by 50%. So when you have a codominant branch, you'll see a reduction of caliper, and that is not desirable. You can see, and one option would be to reduce it. The other option is remove it. Good strategies for nursery are remove the big woods low on the tree. Chinese elms, for example, I do see them down here. They're branched too low, they develop too low, and they get in the way. So I showed you where we removed 100% of leaf area. Not that desirable, but doable. And here's one you remove 5%. This is better. As you can see, the trees grow as the theory of uniform stress. So when that codominant branch was removed, you see the reduction from here to here. Notice the taper developed more uniformly once that branch was gone. So Chinese pistache. Jim, does this meet the spec?
One on the right?
Either of them. They're the same tree. So you can see codominance, headed, no leader.
Yeah, I don't like the one on the right.
Well, it's just a bit different angle. So that doesn't meet spec, does it?
No.
So if I was inspecting that tree, I would reject it. I would reject it because it was headed, ooh, I gotta watch that thing. Headed here. These are the same size. That was headed again, no central leader. How's this one? Better?
Much better.
So you can see subordination cut to slow the growth on that codominant branch and a good strong central leader. So this one would meet spec. So just because the tree was headed doesn't mean it no longer meets spec. What we're asking for in the specifications is that you have a good strong central leader at time of sold. So same tree. This one meets the specifications. I would accept this all day long on any job of any quality. This one I would say nope. I would reject it. So now that you're all experts on structure, these are Liriodendrums. They're identical shape on the outside. They have totally different structure. Which one's really good structure and which one's not so good? This one's really good structure, huh? So if I have to, let's say this is Berkeley and I'm going to put a street in here and I got to raise this up, I can do so making 1 and 2 inch cuts, right? If I have to raise this one up and I remove that, I end up with half a tree. And Liriodendrums are poor compartmentalizers, meaning they decay really bad. So this one's easy to maintain and significantly stronger than this one. The important thing is this turns into this before your eyes very slowly. So that's really the key, is that codominant branch left unchecked at 7 feet is very hard to deal with in year 15. And ideally, you specify something with a good, strong central leader that you don't have that happen.
So basically, subordination, which you heard me mention, is a process of keeping a branch in check or slowing it down. The more wood you remove for it, the slower that branch is going to go relative to the other parts of the tree. And so this is a good aspect ratio. This is a bad aspect ratio. This is 1 to 1. This is 0.5 to 1. Make sense? Okay. So just some training. And these you have to say, and you mentioned you were planting 72-inch box. This is like a 72-inch box size of plant, and what the nursery should be doing, because this would be on a Quercus lobata, your permanent structure. If this would be not good on year 15. And the way to deal with it is subordinate it. So you have a before and after. You'll notice that over a period of time, this starts growing slower and the central leader takes off. And that's what it looks like later. Sometimes you remove them. Tree improves. Notice most of the trees in the picture have low temporary branches. Here's one that was really tricky. Turned out pretty good. Strong central leader. It can be done on bigger trees too. It takes longer and is less desirable, but we don't generally recommend it. This is an adolescent tree. Once they hit maturity, you're not going to make a central leader. I don't want anybody to leave this room and go home and attack their jacaranda with bore structure and try and put a leader in it. Don't do that. So this is Robert Phillips just doing this particular tree. We did a seminar on this subject matter showing how it works. The tree's response was quite good. What we're trying to avoid is this, folks. See this failing? This is not a good situation. This large oak had this huge failure here, and it causes problems. And if you're under it, it causes real problems. This is an oak with a strong central leader, both round. Both round-headed tree. The outside form of the tree is the same. The structure is different. So, and I also wanted to make a comment that it's not as important on small growing trees. This is a Lagostromia or a crepe myrtle. Notice it has no central leader. This is my house. I am not trying to make a central leader out of it. Having said that, we advocate for the training of the form because it's easier to teach the workers and it's easier to get the clearance. So the take-home message is aspect ratio and structure is important. And when they're the same size as the leader, they grow at the same rate. If you have codominance, you can slow it down and have the leader go up. That's really important. That you can do it later in the tree's life. It is less desirable. It's better to do it when the plant's young. I have 3 kids. They're 12, 13, and 15. If I didn't spend any time with them until they're 12, 13, and 15, they're probably not going to turn out good, right? So I'm an advocate for invest the money in the right time, specifying to the nurseries, because the landscape architects are so critical because you deal with the customer, the contractor, and you set the rules. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. And if the landscape architect community is not engaged in this process, you can't make change. We've worked on this subject matter for 20 years, and it's starting to get out into the industry. It's actually starting to improve, but engaging your side of the discipline is critical, and that's why I was willing to fly down and back, because you guys actually are getting in the room trying to make some change. So this is what this is what you use in your real world. This is crown observation. So what we do on our plans is we put a lot of information in the detail as well as the specification, because how many contractors read the spec book, right? Let's see, where's the details? Okay, we bid it, go. If it's in both, they can't argue, I didn't see that. No, it's in the detail. And by the way, it's in the spec on page 465, but it's right there on the detail. And we brought it for low branch trees. and different form of multi-trees. And so there's 75 details that deal with everything from root pruning at planting to tree structure and irrigation. And it is open source and free to use. This Urban Tree Foundation thing, you can erase it and you can change it. So, and then on our details on planting, we show the same thing. And we point out central leader. Because we want the contractor to get used to seeing that, and we want the nurseries to get the calls for it. We don't want to get the poorly structured plants, because the tree lives a long time. It's not an annual. It lives a long time. So what we did is we put together specifications, and these are the nurserymen we're trying to get together to work, to have classes, and then put together a document of how to do it. What we missed was the landscape architects. And without the folks sitting in this room, it doesn't work. So anyway, I show this because this is, I think, what's the botanical garden in San Diego? It's a quell. There's, yeah. So sorry, what is it?
It's now called San Diego.
Okay. So this is an Ulmus parvifolia, and in their parking lot they have Chinese elms, and we did half of them, and we've pruned them every year. And the car, you could walk by it, you have beautiful, strong central leader. This one, all the branches are coming at the same place. People are starting to hit it, and now folks are starting to whack on it, volunteers, because it's in the way. I would argue to the landscape architect community that the tree is the biggest structure you have to work with, and that the structure of the plant is important. And so anyway, that is my 2 cents on this subject matter. I hope did I go too long? No. I'll try to go fast. Okay. Let's see, how did I do? Time? I'm okay? Okay. No, I didn't. But any question? But I want to get to the other speaker. So I fly out at 6 if there's...
No, I think,
okay.
I think you brought some really great points that I know are new to me. So I'd love for you to answer questions, and then we'll get you back on.
Okay.
Hey, Brian. A very good presentation as always. Do you want to take a moment to speak about the importance of spacing the branches along the trunk from the bottom up?
And the question is, talk a little bit about spacing the branches along the trunk. And this gets back to the core, often misunderstanding about how trees work. There's that things stay where they're come out, and they just grow fatter in diameter. And if you look at a big oak, and we have beautiful ocean and bay and palms, so we don't have good things to point, but big trees, large growing trees, could space branches sometimes 10 feet apart. And when you have branches clustered too close together, it tends to compete with the leader and slow that down. So spacing scaffolds is really important. And that can be done over a period of time, if that makes sense. Question?
So let's say there is an issue and you're designing a job and you have a certain height that you need, that specification should be given to the nursery.
Correct. So the question, and so that's really important. If you have a certain branch height, either you have to dictate that to the contractor or the nursery. But the more information the nursery has on what you're trying to get, the better. And so we send the nursery, or force the contractor, send the nursery specifications. Often I call the nursery on our jobs. I might, I don't talk to Jim so much. He's in San Diego now and I'm in Visalia, but I actually, right, wrong, or indifferent, call the production person and say, hey, this is what I want. This is the structure. Make sure what goes on the truck is good. You mind taking a look? And build that relationship with the growers to get good quality trees. It's a lot of what I've seen over the last 20 years is not so good. We waste tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on trees doing it wrong. Everything from infrastructure to girdling roots to pruning and it's somewhat unfortunate because nobody likes to go look at a project that you put a lot into and things went south on you. Are there any other questions, comments, criticisms too? We're good with that.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Question, how soon after planting should the corrective pruning start?
Great question. The question was how soon after planting should the corrective pruning start? And I'm going to say at planting. Our specifications have the contractor, if you're comfortable with the particular contractor, make corrective cuts in the field. There's a research study done at University of Colorado somewhere in the 70s that said, well, you'll slow the growth if you prune at planting or early pruning, and probably everyone's sitting in this room has heard don't prune the plant for like 3 or 4 years because it'll slow it down. Basically, when they did that research study, they pruned the plants and then they ripped them out of the ground and weighed them, and they were on purple leaf plums, which are not even relevant, and the plant that they pruned at planting weighed a little bit less, but it got growth where you wanted it, not where you didn't want it. So it doesn't mean you attack the plant or needlessly remove leaf area. Leaf area is good. Plants like their leaves. Structure is huge. And you think of travel time, and what the folks that work in the municipalities will tell you is we only get so many passes or trips to the tree. If you walk by a defect, next time you show up, the defect's going to be more significant. And you walk by it again, it's going to be more significant every time you see it. So right when you see it, that's the time to do it, when it goes in the ground. What I do is I tell the nursery, please don't send me anything with a defect, because I'm paying for that tree. And I want them to do it. And the other thing I notice is if you prune a tree in front of somebody that doesn't know what's going on, they think you're hurting it. Oh, you're hurting the tree, or I just paid for that branch. You just cut it off. What the hell are you doing? You know? So I like it to happen not necessarily in front of the client until I have a chance to explain to them. But we do explain, hey, when you're doing a Home Depot parking lot, and everybody likes to do the fancy projects, but let's face it, you're going to do the Flying J gas station or the Home Depot parking lot or something. You're going to do those, the strip malls. If the owner understands that, hey, there's a program and we're going to get these trees above the signs of the people that are paying the leases, and this is the strategy, so you can get the high canopy of shade and the aesthetics, and this is how it's going to happen over the first 10 years, you've really left them with something. Because left to their own maintenance program, they're going to whack them. And it's just going to be this ugly thing that's out there. You're going to drive by and say, yeah, it's a Home Depot parking lot, but God, it's crappy. Look at those things. So, good.
On multi-trunk trees, do you apply the same techniques?
We stay away from, what I try to do is work with low branch trees than I do multi-trunk. For example, sycamores. The native sycamore is commonly multi-trunk tree, and folks like them. I like 3 trunks too. But how those are grown is they grow up the tree, then they whack it at about 6 inches above grade, which develops those codominant stems. That's not a natural thing. That's done at the nursery. And then you have all that stress develop there. And I see a lot of failures in the landscape. What I prefer personally is trees that are grown 3 in a box, separated, or trees that are low branched and brought up somewhat codominant for that form. And so I try to stay away from, and you can read it, it's that bark inclusion issue. And I think I can show, oh shoot. You can see all the slides that I got rid of. To trim it down. So this sort of form where you would have this sort of form as opposed to and low branched. So you don't have all your scaffolds coming at one spot. So there is a market for a low branch tree or a multi sort of form. Quercus agrifolius, for example, they're all over the place, and a lot of them were like this. And I look at them break. We just had one a 132, a 132-inch box, one tree per truck, fail on a job that was like that. And let me tell you, that's expensive. The tree was expensive, the planting was expensive, the cleaning up the failure was expensive. You're talking about a $40,000 problem there. It's not good. So it's going to take time to get things perfectly dialed in. There are folks working on it. You reward those that are doing a good job with your specifications, and that drives the marketplace. The landscape architects have more to do with tree structure than arborists by far, because you specify the plants, and that's getting something with good structure out of the gates is huge. I do appreciate you have.
Just one.
Yep. No.
Temporary branching.
Yes.
Constant discussion with clients on, they want to see that tree form. So I try to strike some middle ground and just tell contractors, okay, just take off the first couple of branches, 18 inches, 24.
Yep.
When is a good time
To keep going up.
During, obviously during plant establishment is not, but a year out at.
You could. It's called live crown ratio. If you're taking up 18, 24, 36 inches on an 8-foot tall tree, your live crown ratio is still really good, because what you generally see is 7 to 8 feet of clear trunk and 3 branches at the top. If you're getting plants like that, you're already well ahead of the game. So it's like, show the client a little leg, meaning give them some trunk is what and if you give them some trunk, then they'll buy it. They'll be less going. My wife, who hears more about this stuff than she could ever want to know, said, get those temporary branches off the coastal live oak so I can see my door, and do it now. And so, they don't have to be there forever. But so I want to be fair. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you so much, Brian. And so we are videotaping these presentations, and we will have those posted. It takes a few weeks to get those online, but there'll be continued references. And we'll also post a link to some of the resources for specifications that Brian mentioned. And so next we'll call up Susie, who we all know and love from Village, who is one of our wonderful sponsors for this event, the main sponsor, as is Urban Tree Foundation. And Brian's time flying down here and him bringing his wonderful book to us. So thank you both. Is this? How does this work? Oh, not that one. Forward, backward is these two. And then that's the little. Oh, got it. Yeah.
And then hold it right here. Where's the point of, okay. So good afternoon. I am Susie Weiss, Marketing Rep and New Products Chair. Is this working? For Village Nurseries. In the last few years, I've actually had a really wonderful time seeking out and field testing new plants, as Village has really made an effort to not just bring new plants to the market, but to test and promote only those that are, that will perform and are relevant. So, as you all know, in our industry, everything begins with the landscape architect. And sharing our plants with you and being your resource, because of that, Village, we receive very, very valuable feedback and direction. And with 1,000 acres from Sacramento to San Diego, we are now able to grow every perennial, shrub, or tree in the most appropriate climate. California, we have had a great year, and it began with the beautiful rains. But the drought is still in the forefront of our thinking, and especially with the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance that has imposed some regulations on us. and as a result of the drought. One of the requirements is the use of the WUCOLS list for water budget calculations. And one of the difficulties with this list is it's very limiting. And it also hasn't been updated since 2014. So this is why I was very, very happy to discover a modification that expands the options that are approved by the Department of Water Resources. And what it says is that researchers with academic institutions can now qualify a plant's water usage. So with that, the horticultural team at UC Davis, they have been doing field testing since 2005. And you can find this information on this website. Again, this you guys will have this link. It'll be posted so you can have this, but it's ccuh, ucdavis.edu, resources, plant trials. When you go to that page, you will see years listed from 2005, and you click on that year. And when you do, it will pull up the explanation of the water treatments. First of all, it'll give you the list of plants, the explanation of the water treatments, and then the evaluations. The evaluations are done very, very well. And it's very descriptive, and it'll be very useful for you. So this is wonderful because this gives you another list of plants that you can go to, and it gives you more information if it isn't on the WUCOLS list. So I just want to say that in reviewing the WUCOLS list, I found some inconsistencies. What is low water use in Ventura would be, they had as moderate in San Diego, and that just cannot be. So you can also call me, and I'm not saying I'm an academic institution, but I have written some emails, and I have been able to sway a few I guess what do you call them, landscape auditors in the past. So another great thing is, so when it comes to new plant introductions, they're not on the WUCOLS list also. So Village and many plant breeders are sponsoring the field testing with UC Davis. So when we have a new plant introduction we're really excited about, we add it to their list, and right now they are testing plants for us, and that will be listed on that website as well. So I'd like to share some of those plants with you today, some that they're testing, but also some of the drought-tolerant all-stars that are already on the WUCOLS list. So I want to get started with that. How am I going to do this? Okay, so would it be okay if I pass these around? So our first one is, has anybody here used Bouteloua gracilis Blonde Ambition? What a great name, right? So this plant, this is a warm season grass. It grows about 1 to 2 feet by 1 to 2 feet. It's a beautiful meadow grass. I suggest planting it en masse. What happened here?
You did a fast forward.
Did I really? I didn't even see that. It's very interesting. Okay. Sorry about that. You ought to see when I drive, too. Okay. So I took this picture at the Huntington Garden, and this was a meadow that they have. And one thing I love about Bouteloua gracilis Blonde Ambition, too, is take a look at the flowers. So the flowers are much larger than the species. This one was discovered in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A man named David Salmon with High Country Gardens discovered it. It loves the heat. It is very tough, very drought tolerant. Blonde Ambition is more vigorous. It has a much larger flower. It's just more robust. And I think it's more drought tolerant. It seems to always look nice. Now, because it's a warm season grass and you want to get the most bloom out of it, I would suggest if you're going to cut it in the winter and let it fill up with buds. And the other thing I love is if you take a look at this picture, does it give you the impression of maybe a rock concert or like flags that are cheering you on as you're walking by? This is a real happy plant. So again, it's 1 to 2 feet. It blooms in the summer. It has the common name of mosquito grass because now that's for the species, and that's the smaller flowers. By the way, the species, the flowers are a little more purplish. These are really blonde, hence the name Blonde Ambition, and much larger. And they look like happy flags, so they kind of cheer you up. So I love this grass. Our next plant, this is a native. This is native to San Luis Obispo. Did I do it again? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to, thank you. Okay, so this is,
Take control away. Do that.
yeah, go to see, this is Ceanothus maritimus valley violet. It's native to San Luis Obispo County. Now, this was discovered by UC Davis. They started testing it in their field trials, and because it performed so wonderfully, and what I mean by that is it's adaptable, it's slower growing than other Ceanothus, but it can take summer water where some Ceanothus will not. Because it's slower growing, they say it's much longer lived than other Ceanothus. It has a beautiful rounded habit, so it's only about 2 to 3 feet tall by 3 to 4 feet wide. If you get a really close look at it, the leaves kind of look like oak leaves. They're very dark green. But the best aspect of this plant is it blooms. It is covered in blue-purple clusters in the spring. And my favorite factor of this plant is, or benefit of this plant is longer lived and can take summer water. And what that means to me is when our clients are happy, when your clients are happy, then we're happy. And this is an adaptable plant that will grow very well in a regular ornamental garden. So with some natives, they can't really handle summer water. So anyway, it does very well. Okay, thank you, Michelle. Oh, here's another one. Okay, so I'm really excited about the plants I brought you today. This is a very cool, look at this. This is a Laurus nobilis little ragu. So this is a dwarf. You wanna, I don't know if you can pass that around. Take a good look. The stems are red. The leaves, they're very, very aromatic. The leaves are such a deep, deep, shiny green, and the stems are red. This grows only 6 to 8 feet by 6 to 8 feet, and it'll take about 10 years for it to do that. So when you're looking for just a nice green screen, something that always looks nice and maybe that something you might want to cook with, this is your perfect plant. You could even grow it in its natural state, so you can grow it as a hedge or in its natural state. You can put it in a pot right by the kitchen, right outside. It has a really Mediterranean look. But, you know, with some bay plants, you have to crush them in your hands to really get that scent. This one, you don't have to do that. You can just walk up and you can just smell the leaves. They're very aromatic. But again, nice small screen. This is a plant that I would put in the category of dry lush because it's also drought tolerant. So, and on the WUCL's list, it's listed as low water use. So isn't that cool? It looks very, very tropical. So, okay. No, we don't. Okay, great. So, are a lot of you using Lomandra, maybe Lomandra breeze, other Lomandras? Lomandras are not grasses, they're perennials, but they are super tough. This one right now is in the 2017 water trial with UC Davis, and I actually had a picture of it on one of the slides back. They're testing it in the shade, they're testing it in the sun. This plant is doing fabulous in every situation with every water treatment, and I think this is going to be in their all-star group. So UC Davis, they choose about 100 plants to go with their all-star group, and I think this one's going to go in it. This one's called Platinum Beauty. It is the first variegated Lomandra. Because it's so drought tolerant and it's just so adaptable, this plant looks excellent with succulents. So I picture maybe one of the burgundy succulents or maybe an echeveria. Anyway, it'd be really pretty. 2 to 3 feet by 2 to 3 feet. Anyway, excellent. It'll also do really well in a median because it's so tough. Am I getting background noise on this? Or is that just, okay, maybe I ought to hold it lower. Oh, okay. This plant was discovered by a man with Village. His name is Nicholas Stadden. Many of you may have met him. We call him the plantsman. And he discovered this in El Toro on the Marine base. And what is different about this one plant than the species is, if you notice, if you look at this picture, this is a plant that is growing in his neighborhood. So he planted it and he's been keeping an eye on it. And if you look at that picture, the bloom where the regular pink muley is more pink, this is more of a, in some instances, eggplant color, but really more of a purple color. So it's really pretty. Now, I've been asked, how is it different from Regal Mist? Well, it's much more robust, it's more vigorous, it has a more uniform bloom, it's much more floriferous, and it blooms about 2 to 3 weeks later. So you're just going to get a real uniform bloom, and it's quite stunning. So it blooms in the fall, another warm season grass that benefits from pruning it in the winter. So this is one that I actually suggest pruning it in the winter, cut it back, and you get a much more full bloom in the fall. So it's called Plume-tastic. Sometimes I forget to say the names, but at least I have it on the screen. So Muhlenbergia capillaris Plume-tastic. Actually, it's a very stunning grass. Okay. And here's another one of my personal favorites. This has been around a long time. It's a California native, Penstemon heterophyllus. This variety is called Margarita Bop, or BOP. It got its name. It was discovered at Santa Margarita Nursery, not Las Colitas, but it was discovered up in their Santa Margarita yard and at the back of the porch. That's where it gets Margarita BOP. So Margarita Bop is a plant that will bloom spring, summer, and what's really cute about this plant, this is very floriferous. It starts out with this cute little yellow bud, so it kind of lets you know something's about to happen. It's really pretty. Then it comes out with blue, and the flowers start fading to lavender. And when it does that, it looks like a watercolor. So it's just a nice little mounding. It's about 2 to 3, I'd say 2 feet by 2 feet, but I think 2 to 3 by 1 to 2 feet. But again, very floriferous, pretty little watercolor-like bloom, really pretty blue. And it's also a California native that grows in the coastal foothills and in the woodland areas. It takes full sun, but it can take a little bit of shade as well. So Penstemon heterophyllus Margarita Bop. And then, oh goodness. Okay, this is a really tall sample. I brought 2 samples. Will you hold that? Here's a smaller sample. So this is Salvia clevelandi Winifred Gilman. Winifred Gilman is different than the regular clevelandi because it has electric blue flowers. It blooms all summer. This plant became a favorite of mine when I went to visit my dad. He lives up in Northern California. And there was, he wanted me to look at his irrigation system. And I'm not that great with them, but I discovered that there was one little area that wasn't working. And there were 2 plants that were doing fabulously in that area where all the others were struggling. And one was Tagetes, the mountain marigold, and Salvia Winifred Gilman. And they do benefit from an occasional deep water, but they can handle drought like nobody's business. They're about 4 by 4. They bloom all summer. Another time I saw them was along this horse corral. It's a beautiful wooden fence, but they were all in mass. And I expected to see hummingbirds going crazy on them, but they were covered with butterflies, and they were in full bloom. Really, really nice. So it's about 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet. So they look really beautiful along a fence line, but also in just did kind of a mixed native garden as well. So this is Salvia clevelandi Winifred Gilman. And by the way, did everybody get a raffle ticket, or are we going to hand them out? Did everybody get one? So we're going to raffle off the plants. I have more outside. We have a selection of other low water plants. So I brought about 40 plants. So there's a very good chance you're going to get one. So meet me at the table. So our last plant, this is one that Carol Bornstein, I don't know if any of you attended our landscape architect and design group meeting last winter, but she spoke at it, and she collected this plant in an area called the Canyon de la Mina. That's how it gets its name, Verbena lilacina de la Mina. This plant will bloom year-round in Southern California, but its peak season is spring and summer, but it's got this medium green foliage that's very delicately dissected, and it's got this pretty kind of lavender purple flower. I've seen this underneath Circidium Desert Museum, and they look great together. So it's very drought tolerant. It's another 2 to 3 by 3 to 4 foot. So it's a little wider than it is tall, mounding, excellent drought tolerant perennial. Should be in all of your designs. So there, you can pass that around. So those are our selections that I wanted to introduce to you today, and I will be outside at the table if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. So real quickly, I know some of our stewardship members had elected to take their books later. Is there anybody who, I know you didn't get one? Jen Spencer, back in the corner. Anybody else didn't get a book? No, we're all good. Okay. So we really appreciate Nick Basinski from the County Agriculture Weights and Measures Department coming in to teach us about some of the pests that are in our area that maybe are a threat to our wildlands. I've found sometimes as a landscape architect, I'm the first one on site trying to do a big picture environmental analysis. So, you know, they've been really developing some great tools to kind of track the pests that are happening and give us pointers on how to deal with some of the wood and the things that are byproducts of development. So now that he's walked back in the door.
I had a few more minutes.
That's okay.
All right.
So this is forward, backwards, and then the pointers.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm Nick Basinski with the County Ag Department. My department, we regulate mainly imports and exports of nursery stock from the county, in and out of the County of San Diego. Pests I'm about to be talking about are more wildland pests, but you know, I started my career as a wildlife biologist, and I'm really active in native plant landscaping just personally, so I've ended up getting involved with a lot of the outreach with these pests. So if you are a land manager doing any kind of mitigation or managing parks or rights-of-way easements, restoration projects, these pests may be something that you'll end up dealing with. They're not really something applicable to landscaping, normal kind of landscaping you would do, but they could be. The first one, this is a pretty new one, the invasive shot hole borer. The name keeps changing. You may hear Polyphagus shot hole borer, Kuroshio shot hole borer. They started calling it exotic for a while, now it's invasive. It's a very tiny little beetle, and it has fungus in its mouth parts, and as it burrows through the wood, the fungus, is fusarium, ends up decaying the wood, and the beetle feeds on the fungus. A little symbiotic relationship, and both of those aspects put together are what kills the trees, and it can kill trees very quickly. See these spots up here, the blue triangles are one of the kinds of beetles. They're the Polyphagus Kuroshio. They've done some studies on them, and some people say they're different. I don't know. The effect is always the same on the trees, so we just call the complex invasive. But these are some beetles that have been established for several years up north. They showed up in a couple parts of San Diego County, North County, and out here in El Cajon area, and you'll see this is December 2014. There was not too many of them. And then in 2015, they killed all of the willow riparian habitat in the Tijuana River Valley. Millions of trees dead in a matter of months. They really like castor bean, or the plant, so they're eating in this castor, the population's amplifying, the castor can grow back the next year, but the willows can't. So all of this habitat for the willow flycatcher, leaf spells, vireos, all completely wiped out in months. This is what the damage will look like when you look at a piece of wood with the exit holes coming out. And it looks like somebody just stood a few feet away and shot it with a shotgun, just lots of holes. Now there are several native ambrosia beetles that will eat downed wood, and on dead wood you will see similar damage, but those don't attack live wood the way this beetle does. So if it's very recently dead or still alive with this density of very small exit holes, then that's a polyphagous shot hole borer infestation, likely. It really likes sycamore. So this is how tiny the little exit hole will be, and it kind of looks like you can even see the little beetle butt sticking out of that hole, and you see how small it is. If you chip away a piece of the bark, you see the fusarium fungus doing its damage to the tree. Again, it doesn't look like a heck of a lot, but here, if the ground is moist and there's a lot of water being pulled up, you'll see some of the sap leaking out. As the sap dries out, you'll see the sugary, just the dried up exudate. And if the ground is really wet, there will just be water coming out of the holes in the tree. If you hack it off, you can see the damage that in the galleries of the fusarium fungus decaying the wood. And this one's really, really decayed, the whole tree eaten up in that one. This is a new pest. It came here from Asia, and it's trying to find plants that it likes, that it can successfully reproduce in, and it's trying everything and turns out to be pretty successful in everything. So there isn't really a host list because it attacks everything it finds and kills a lot of it. So we've been seeing it, like I said, in a lot of wildland habitat. Sycamore, willow, it's killing a lot of trees, but it can attack small things. It's very likely that this plant can be moved in nursery stock. We don't know how it came here from Asia, but it could have been in pallets to Mexico, and then up here we really don't know how this showed up, but we started noticing it within the past, in San Diego, less than 5 years. Now, to control this, if you are dealing with trees that have an infestation of this, there may be some pesticide controls. I just got an email today about possible pesticide controls, a study that was done. I haven't got to read it yet, but because you can see it goes way into this wood isn't carrying any nutrients, so a systemic pesticide wouldn't work on it. There can be 5 generations of beetle reproducing in the tree before an adult ever emerges. So a contact pesticide on the outside isn't going to have any effect on the population, so pesticides mainly aren't going to work. But if you can trim away the infested portions of the tree or chop the whole tree down, that's basically the best thing you can do, and chip it very small and leave the chippings on site. You can tarp them. The tarp it for a few months. If you're on the coast, tarping isn't going to get the temperatures up enough to kill any of the pests, but you can let the beetles run their course and die under the tarp. And leave it on site. Again, chip it very fine, leave the mulch on site, and let the beetle die there. You know the beetle's there already, let it die there, don't transport it. Solarization and composting. Again, solarization isn't really effective on the coast. You need temperatures near 100 degrees to get decent solarization kill, but you can leave it on site. And the number one preventative measure is don't move firewood. That's what we have a really big problem with, how this pest and the next pest I'll be talking about get moved around, is through just taking whole trees off site, and all the bugs fly out from wherever you move it to. Let's see. Okay, gold spotted oak borer. It has been in San Diego for 10 or 12 years. We know quite a bit about it now, and it spread very quickly the first several years, but because of our firewood education, the spread has been greatly decreased. We went from moving 4 or 5 miles a year to moving only a few hundred yards a year now. This is the adult beetle. It's very small. You'll probably never see an adult beetle. These like coast live oaks mostly, and they like big ones. So if you've been out in Julian, Descanso, Ramona, parts of El Cajon, there's very significant mortality in the large oak trees because of this. But you won't see the adults. These are the life stages of the larvae through the adult. You won't see those either unless you're digging in the tree. What this beetle likes to do is eat right along this area and the inner cambium. And if there's enough burrows and enough larvae eating around the base of the tree, they'll essentially girdle the tree. And that's where they do their damage, where the other one burrows all the way through the tree, and the invasive shot-hole borer will burrow all the way through the tree and turn the entire trunk into sawdust. This one just eats this little layer and girdles it. These really like drought-stressed trees, or at least drought-stressed trees die quicker when they are infested with gold-spotted oak borer. Here you can see galleries. This is a bark piece that has been chipped off, and you can see all the galleries with the frass in here. But the number one, they like coast live oak and black oak, agrifolia and kelloggi. That's their favorite, their preferred. Canyon live oak and Engelmann oak, they will attack. They don't really like scrub oak because they like big, thick trunks. So the thinner trunk, scrubby kinds, they don't go for as well, but those also aren't used in landscape as much. And the coast live oaks that you get from a nursery, even the big box ones, the trunks are pretty small and they're not likely to be infested anytime soon. So here's the distribution of these. CAL FIRE, because this kills big trees that are a fire risk, CAL FIRE is very involved with the mapping of the distribution of these. So you can see Descanso, El Cajon, Ramona, Julian is where most of them are. A San Diego resident brought a bunch of firewood up to his cabin in Idlewild. That's what this is. They got that one under control pretty quickly because of all the research that had been done in San Diego. They kind of knew what to look for and how to control it, so they did all right. But in San Diego, Descanso is ground zero, and it's just killing everything now. And you see here the smaller trees, under 10 inches, fairly low mortality, fairly low infestation rate. Once you get up to the big trees, 20 and 30, where the insect is established, you're getting almost half the trees dead. Pretty much all of them infested, half of them dead. And you get areas like this, 200-year-old trees just all wiped out within a couple of years with the combination of the drought and the beetle. This is what you would look, how you'd be able to spot it from a distance. And this is the main giveaway. You can spot it from driving down the highway. You'll see these bald patches in the tree. And this is where a beetle got in there ate through this little bit of cambium, and whatever portion of the tree received its nutrients from right in here ends up getting choked off and dies. So you'll see a hole like this, a beetle exit hole with sap coming out. So if there's enough soil moisture and it's a fresh wound, there will be sap coming out. You will also see woodpecker damage where the woodpeckers are digging through the grubs. On older trees, or older wounds, let's see, I don't know if you can see all these little red dots. All these red dots are painted on, but they are to mark exit holes as part of a study, so we knew how many were coming through each year. But it's just going to be a little hole, and we have cards that I didn't bring with me today, a little business card size with a punched exit hole in them that you can match up for size. And we have, I don't know, these are available at various other seminars you might go to, or UC Extension hands them out. So it's just this little tiny D-shaped hole is how they exit. And on an older one, you won't see any sap around it, but that'll show you how many, it'll show you that the pest is present. So, yes?
When you said the exit holes were painted red, do you know how many are coming out in a year?
Yeah, we went 1 year, painted every hole red, came back the next year, so we knew that any hole that was in there was from this year's reproduction.
Okay. My question actually is, are the, borers, are they likely to attack a tree in a particular part, like lower trunk, mid trunk, or up in the crown or something?
This beetle likes big, thick trunks. So you're going to find it from the ground up to 8, 10, 12 feet. That's where most of it is. The adults feed on foliage up in the canopy, but that's not really doing any damage. It's where they will land is as on the big branches. And the big, thick trunk is where the majority of the population is breeding. And if you want to control it, those are the trees you look for, and those are the branches that you would spray with pesticides if you go that route. All right, so integrated pest management, if you want to control the pest or just work on the health of the trees in the area, these are the traps we set out, or you might see those traps in a Forest Service area. They're not for control, it's just for monitoring, and in reality you don't need them. You can tell by looking at the canopy of the tree, looking at the trunk of the tree, the traps are of minimal use. Pesticide applications have been very, very useful in limited situations. If you have like specimen trees in a park or in an area, in a stand that you manage that you're able to do pesticide applications in, big trees that are serving as population reservoirs and infesting all the other small trees around them, those can be sprayed, but trying to spray the national forest, it's not viable. But parks, our county parks have had excellent luck spraying the trees once a year, maybe twice a year, timed with the bugs' emergence and flight patterns, and it's been really good. And you just spray the trunk. You don't have to spray the whole tree, so you're not wiping out the whole ecosystem that's living within the tree, just the trunk, and that ends up killing the adult pests, the adult beetles that land on it to lay eggs, and also the young as they emerge, because they both happen about the same time. So when it works, if you're able to, it's excellent. And if you want to learn about that, arborist seminars, we give very lengthy, detailed talks about the pest control aspect, but this probably don't have enough time for that. Cutting down the trees. If you have a big tree that's serving as a population reservoir, or it's too far gone, it's a big tree, already 150, 200 years old, you can't really save it. Cut it down, handle the wood properly, and restoration. If you have an area that has trees dying, just remember that you have to grow new trees. Don't just try to save the old trees. Recruitment is always important. if you are removing trees in your parks, your rights of way, anything, grinding it to less than 3 inches and leaving the grindings on site is ideal, but it's not always feasible if you don't have a tub grinder. Normal tow-behind wood chippers can't handle oak trees. So another option is bark removal, and it's kind of time consuming, but probably cheaper than buying a tub grinder, is sawing the bark off. The bark will go through a regular wood chipper and leaving the rest of the wood. You do whatever you want with the rest of the wood, because once the bark is gone, it's not a threat anymore. Seasoning, just leaving the wood on site. The bugs will emerge from that, but if your area is already infested, you're not furthering the damage, so you can leave the trees there for a couple of years, let it run its course until it's no longer a threat of transporting the pest around, and then remove it. Tarping doesn't kill the bug. The bugs love the heat, so you put it in there, make a nice oven, and they're all going to come out. They're going to be really happy, and they can probably chew through the tarp, or if you're using cheap tarp material that's going to fall apart in the sun, that you're not really going to contain the spread, but we just put it up there to show that people do it, but it doesn't really have a lot of effect. The main thing is don't move the wood off site. And just to show you what's in the bark, this little tiny bit of bark here, not very much, threw it in a barrel, sealed it up, put this trap on the lid. This little tiny bit of bark, after a month, produced 168 beetles. So when you think of just moving, drop a tree on the side of the wood, someone comes along with a pickup truck thinking they're going to sell a load of firewood, you're talking 1,000 beetles at that point that they're going to bring to their neighborhood and sell to their neighbors. So be very cognizant of what you're doing with the trees that you're dropping. Now, South American palm weevil. This is a really new one. It's attacking Canary Island date palms it's been in Mexico, in Tijuana for 5-6 years. A couple years ago, it showed up in the Sweetwater River Valley, and it's killing a number of Phoenix canariensis down there. It's a huge beetle. It's almost the size of your palm. This grub doesn't look like much here, but that's bigger than your thumb. It's big. It's nasty, and the adults are very strong flyers. They'll go down into the apical meristem crown, and they'll start eating away at the newly forming fronds. So as the fronds start opening up, what they look like is something that's been chewed on. This is all older growth, because where they're actually feeding is just at the very tip, the soft green tips. And I did not include any other pictures beyond this, but you'll notice that after a couple of years, the whole crown will die, and if it's in a parking lot or next to your business, next to a house, the whole crown, 4,000 pounds, fall over, cause a lot of damage. So you really need to be cognizant of trees that start looking like that close to buildings. Now, where we're finding most of them on this side of the border is in riverbeds, in canyons, where you have clusters of feral Phoenix canariensis. And those, it's kind of tough to manage those. Who manages riverbeds? Homeless people like to live under them. It's kind of tough, but that's where the populations are right now, and where they're really being amplified. And the adults are strong flyers, but they don't like to if there's another Phoenix canariensis nearby, or they'll just stay in the same one they're in. They'll do that. So the likelihood of one landscape tree off on its own being attacked is minimal, but it's not impossible. And we're very concerned about this attacking Southern California's valuable date crop industry. This could very easily jump onto Phoenix dactyliferas and start going after those. We haven't seen it here yet, but it's not out of the question. It hasn't been on any of the fan palms, Washingtonias, anything like that. But it's something to look out for. There are pesticide options, but can you really spray in a riverbed? That's kind of tough. I know City of San Diego has been helicopter logging some of these out when there are problems. That's it. And Don't move firewood or just leave it on site. All right, all of this information, I just gave a super brief crash course. Identification, other concerns, control. These are all very well laid out on the UC websites. UC ANR, UC Riverside have all done a ton of research and have very accurate, up-to-date maps. So you can access any of those, easy to Google, UC Riverside, and the pest name. It has more information than you can handle. That's the best way to learn more about those, and that's all I have for right now. Any questions? Yes?
How big is the South American palm beetle? Did you say it's the size of our?
Yeah, it's in your palm. So the adult probably this big. Thumb size easily, bigger than thumb size. Yeah. Oh, they're raised for food. The larvae, they grow in palm plantations and purposely infest the crowns of the palms on the low-growing ones and harvest them, fry them up. Yes.
Hopefully those won't be for our birds. So you mentioned 3 inches minus for the chipping the wood,
Correct.
the gold spotted oak.
Mhm.
Is there a recommendation for the shot gold or chipping?
If you can get smaller, then get smaller. Obviously, it's a smaller beetle that doesn't need as much wood to live because it's feeding on its own fungus that it brings in. It's not feeding on the nutrients that the plants are carrying. So you got to do more work on those, but it's so new, I don't really know how much. I mean, if you have whatever grinder you have, but 3 inch minus probably work, but if you have less, go for it. All right.
Thank you, Nick. And then our last speaker, who I haven't seen sneak in, oh, there you're right behind me. So Vince is going to talk to us a little bit about how we work carefully around existing trees when we're adding new components of the landscape. And then is it
Forward,
backward,
backward.
and then that's it.
All right, thank you. We really wanted to talk about what's going on below ground. Brian talked about things that are above ground earlier in the day. So we'll talk about what's going on below ground with trees and how we can help them out. A lot of landscapes now, obviously we're doing a lot of conversions. A lot of turf is being removed still. And just a lot of moving into different areas. We need to preserve the existing canopy as part of our construction. So tree protection becomes a very big and important part of any landscape plan. There's a few different parts of it, and just we'll run through it really quickly because I'm standing between us and some hors d'oeuvres and beer and wine, so we'll make it quick. So the tree protection is it's starting to be more of a requirement for local jurisdictions. The critical root zone, one way to calculate that and estimate it is 1 foot for every 1 inch, a 1 foot radius for every 1 inch diameter of tree trunk. So you got a 24-inch tree, you want to have a 24-inch root protection zone. The tree protection zone is the area where construction activities are prohibited. Basically, you want to keep your tractors out. Build a nice sturdy fence, which is the tree protection barrier. 4 foot high, so we can see it. Lots of signage, and you want it to be sturdy so that, just putting some hurricane fencing up, nice orange fencing, someone's going to move it and park their truck under there to be in the shade. So we want to make sure to protect the base of the tree. Basically this is done to protect the roots of the tree, help them with, that's the most important part, that's where the water is getting absorbed. Sometimes we'll see people put down mulch around the tree that wasn't there before. Keep it a thin layer, help keep the water and the roots absorbing the water during construction. The big thing we wanted to talk about was irrigation. It's really kind of a hot topic right now still. Obviously we're out of the drought, right? Reservoirs are full for now. Sure has been a long hot summer already though, so something we're still going to need to be watching. So really three major parts of irrigation best management practices is your design. You want to have it designed for water use efficiency and the site that you're on. You're going to water differently if you're out on the coast than if you're out in El Cajon. Proper watering for all landscape elements. We're starting to see hopefully the tide turn from where people can say, okay, well, we're having a park, I'm going to put down some grass, I'm going to plant some trees, and we're just going to water and everything's going to be green, and as long as the grass is green, everything's going to be fine. That's really not the case. Trees need different water requirements. They need not as often, but also longer duration. You want that water to be going deep into the ground. Where grass wants the top 1 or 2 inches, trees want 6, 7, 8 inches of water. We want to install our irrigation to meet design criteria. So you're going through, you're consulting with an irrigation consultant, developing your plans. You want to make sure that there's no corners being cut by the contractor. And manage landscape water resources. Remember Ron Popeil? Set it and forget it. It's not what we want to do. We want to set it, monitor it, make changes as we go along. We're going to need to make changes to the irrigation schedule for December versus July. Big thing for trees. Trees require separate irrigation control valves. We want infrequent, deep irrigation. Water where the roots are. So for trees, that's going out pretty much at minimum to the edge of the canopy. Really going beyond is even better. Drip and micro irrigation is best wherever practical. It's not, we'll show a slide later, it's not those bubblers that you stick in the ground. That doesn't quite get water where we need it. Organic mulch. Consider mulch as a design element. One thing that the picture in front of Brian's house, if you guys saw, you had some grass, you had a nice little pathway, you had your trees, you had a driveway, and you had more grass. Underneath the trees was what? It was mulch. Wasn't grass. So the best thing for the landscape underneath trees is organic mulch. That's what they have in the forest. Grass tends to be watered differently, so we want to keep them separate. Benefits of it helps retain soil moisture. As that mulch breaks down, it actually adds nutrients, and it improves the soil profile. You can turn hard clay soils into a lot more organically containing soils by keeping mulch going over the course of time. It'll protect your drip irrigation. That's kind of a problem. That's why we like those the big rotator spray nozzles. That's why we like the big sprinklers, because they can stand up to some use and abuse. We start stepping all over the drip irrigation, and that's going to start being a problem. So it does help protect that irrigation. Reduces competition from grass to other plants. Another big thing is it provides protection against mower damage. We start seeing this in parks a lot that have grass growing underneath the trees. Mower comes in, starts shaving off the roots, and just starts causing problems with the structure of the tree. What we want to do is keep it 3 to 4 inches deep, definitely away from the trunk. I didn't put a picture of a mulch volcano in here. You guys know what I'm talking about? We'll see it on the East Coast a lot. The mulch up 2-3 feet sometimes. That's just going to cause decay and rot at the base of the trunk. So we want to keep it 3 to 4 inches and then keep it a couple inches away from the base of the trunk so that we're not causing any damage there. And extend to the drip line, ideally, recognizing we're all taking different things into account when we're designing these landscapes. So if you can't go to the drip line, 4 to 5 foot minimum around the trunk is going to be the best. Drip systems for trees, really spiraling it out or doing concentric circles and just having inline emitters is the best practice there. You want to start near the trunk, spiral it outwards until you get to the drip line or beyond. And you place that under mulch for maximum effectiveness. Was looking at a tree one time and was like, yeah, we water it. We got a drip system we put it on, but we're essentially watering the mulch. The mulch was absorbing all the water. The tree wasn't getting anything. So one, they had a problem with duration, how long they were watering, but two, the irrigation wasn't set up right in the first place. Watering considerations. Watering requirements for trees depend on size, species, location, season. You're going to water the same species differently out here than you are out in East County. Consult an arborist. Arborists are out here to help. We all need to talk more. Sam, good to see you. Haven't seen you enough lately. Sam's an arborist too. But we all are after the same thing. Landscape architects, arborists, we all want healthy, vigorous trees in our landscape. So let's all work together. The watering considerations can be as little as 10 gallons a week for new trees. 500 gallons per month for large trees is something that can be required, especially in times of drought. If we're not getting enough rain in the wintertime to water the trees to help them get through the summer drought, we need to provide some supplemental watering when that's going on. What this means is we may need to run irrigation for hours, not minutes. You're not putting on a drip system, running it for 20 minutes and calling it good like you can with some lawn rotors. You may need to water it for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes. That's why we need those separate irrigation control valves again. And when watering, you want to ensure the soil is moist to a depth of 12 to 14 inches. I threw this in here, almost took the slide out. These tree gators, tree watering bags, they're an alternative you can use when you're establishing new trees, but the problem here is if you're using them, then you don't have irrigation installed in the first place. So, and those cases where you need them, yeah, let's use them. Ideally, we have the irrigation installed. They have them in park settings in these photos. Probably where they'd be a little more ideal is in street cutouts in front of houses. When we're establishing the trees, we want to make sure they have a consistent amount of water going on, and that may be a little hard for the homeowners to help provide supplemental irrigation for city trees. So we can use these, get them going for the first couple of years, and then maybe we can get the homeowner to sign on for watering that tree once a month to keep it going. But they are in place. I do see them used a lot, not so much here, but just something to think about if you're designing in that sort of landscape. One thing we also wanted to talk about too was turf replacement. That's definitely happening a lot, right? We're getting irrigation or getting rebates and things like that. People are redesigning their landscape. Ripping up the grass and leaving a tree, that's ideal instead of taking out the tree too and planting a new one. But what you got to think about is that tree is going to be growing in a completely different environment now. It's used to having the grass underneath. It's used to a certain watering scheme, which is probably going to change and may not have been ideal, but it was still what it was used to. So it's going to cause some stress by removing that grass. When you're doing this is a good time to ensure proper irrigation for the trees. Obviously, we're doing some major landscape renovations when we're taking out the grass, so let's make sure we got good irrigation practices going in to make that landscape successful. Mulch is very important here. Organic mulch is huge. A lot of rock and things like that going in. That's not really ideal. It creates a lot of heat and can actually sunburn the tree. Artificial turf too. Artificial turf that uses the black tires, I mean, that stuff gets hot. I got a 15-year-old that plays soccer, and they put all that on all the football fields now, and it's super hot. They're out there wetting their shoes down, so think what it's doing to a tree that has to live under or live above it and underneath it throughout its life. So use a thinner layer of organic mulch that's probably not used to being mulched already. So maybe instead of 3 to 4 inches, just put a couple inches down. That lets the air still get down to the roots and lets them develop where they need to be. And yeah, stay away from rock and artificial turf underneath the trees. We can still talk about drought. We still need to talk about drought. It's going to be a factor for really a long time coming. Lawns are expensive. Lawns are less expensive to replace than trees. You get a 30, 40-year-old tree, you take that out, it's going to be 30, 40 years before you get that tree back. You take a lawn out, you can have a lawn in 2 months. So let's make sure that if we are cutting back on water, we're reducing turf irrigation, we need to think about what we're doing to the trees. They can handle a lot of times a 20 to 40% reduction, but you got to monitor the health. So if you're just reducing the amount of water you're putting down, just make sure that you're paying attention to the tree, how it's looking, and give it some more water if need be. You can do that with the soaker hose, the drip line that we were showing. Bring in a watering truck if you need to. But you want to provide a good deep watering 1 to 2 times a month. San Diego Urban Forest Council website, that's something I'm a member of. Essentially we're part of a larger California Urban Forest Council organization, which you may have heard of, probably not, but we're really trying to get the messaging out a lot with tree watering and the importance of trees and the investment in the community that they make. So sdrufc.com, we've got some tree watering guidelines on there. We're working with Water Authority and things like that, and we're developing some parallel messaging that we can get out to everybody. These are the ones we don't want, the non-preferred irrigation, the bubblers. Problem is, I can't remember what city I pulled this from. San Diego has something similar. When you're installing trees, you have to install a 6 by 36 inch perforated drain pipe filled with clean pea gravel to house the irrigation bubbler. That water, the bubbler will water right here. It's going to water right here, great. Or it's not going to water is over here. It's not going to water over here. So if your design specs are calling for that, while you're going through the initial design of the project, consider trying to change it. Work with the client that you're working for and say, hey, look, these are more acceptable practices to use drip systems. Let's try to do this instead. If it's not possible, definitely separate control valves you got to monitor. Make sure everything's going good. I think Brian talked about this a lot too, that we're not just designing the landscape. Landscape architects are really the first step in a big partnership that takes place for a healthy landscape. We've got the design, we've got the construction, the big part is the maintenance. When these projects are being designed, the client needs to know you're going to need to water here, this is what your water budget's going to be, this is what you need to plan for. Otherwise, all this work that I'm doing, I might as well not even do. We can just go throw some rock out and call it good, right? Or you can plan to replace the landscaping every few years. So just want to throw this out there that, stay involved. Be involved with the construction, write maintenance plans into your designs. Just a little infographic. What do we need to do to keep trees healthy too? We need to get moving, we need to inspect the trees, we need to find when somebody's cutting them in half when they're still babies and make sure that we can go out there and fix it. Keep them well fed, give them some fertilizer. Healthy hydration, the irrigation that we've been talking about. Make good choices, it's just putting the right trees in the proper landscape. Look up, look for power lines. Don't put a palm tree underneath power lines. Try to design without palm trees anyway. And schedule regular checkups, work with arborists, get some inspection done, make sure everything's growing good. That's all part of the partnership. I hope nobody worked on this one. This was the Burger King out in Rancho San Diego. Kid that plays soccer also likes chicken fries, so we'll go there. He likes chicken fries, so we go there fairly regularly. So going through the drive-through, circle around and see they're doing some construction. I see these trees sitting in the parking lot one week. A couple weeks later, see them in the ground, and they're probably 36-inch box or something. And the box sides were off, the trees hadn't been backfilled, they hadn't been watered. I think it's going to not end well. A couple weeks later, yeah, they finally watered them, but this little guy probably wasn't enough. So it's part of the partnership, though, staying involved during the construction process, right? Those trees, one, never should have been left on the pavement for a week. Blacktop, yeah, summertime. Two, they get the trees in the ground, they need to get them irrigated, get the soil backfilled, and keep things moving, because otherwise that happens. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
So I have a question about the drip tubing around the tree and not using bubblers, because I always use bubblers. So, but my fear is if you have a separate system, drip system for the trees, most of the time your trees are in a shrub area anyways. So the contractor is going to have to, specifically, I have a feeling unless you're involved in construction administration, they're going to be like, oh, we'll just keep doing the drip for the shrubs, and then the tree doesn't get any extra watering, whereas now at least it gets the bubbler. Is there like another alternative that could keep it separate from the drip, but still, like, would you recommend doing like little sprays maybe instead of the bubbler?
Yeah, the sprays can work. If they're installing separate systems, you're doing a fresh install, it's a good idea. Separate them out some more. Still have, the trees need different watering requirements than the shrubs too, so if you want to add to that.
The valve, having a separate valve for the trees is really important. And bubblers can work if it's flat. What you showed was the deep root water, and that was kind of developed at one point, throw the gravel in the bubbler, and then manufacturers said, oh, we can sell this. And they're like $42.50 a piece. And what happens is the flood bubbler goes below the root zone and follows the irrigation trench. So often the plants are totally under stress with the deep root water things. A flood bubbler that sends a plane out of water on a flat surface and perks through the root zone is okay. But the drip, whether it's a flood bubbler, drip, or tubing around, that's really a runtime issue. The important part is getting an isolated valve for the irrigation, if that makes sense. So in the contract that you just spec, you have a tree line and a shrub line. And if you wrap drip tubing around it, that works. If you have a really flat plane and you wanted like a 0.25 GPM, that would work, bubbler on both sides, or a drip would work both sides. Deep root waters aren't so good. Water goes past. So.
And then do you have any details for like the drip tubing? I know you have details, but
Yeah, we have.
Oh, you do?
We can probably link to some better details, but that basic design, concentric circles and spirals, and with, I think, well, I'll add more drip heads, right? And the tree will get more water, but we start to see the water running off. So it really is keeping it slow and keeping the water from running off. Slow and long duration. Sam?
Yeah, you mentioned planting shrubs around trees. It is actually better not to plant shrubs around trees because there is no way you're going to be watering shrubs on one system or schedule and water the trees on another schedule and not still get the trees to get too much water. What works for the shrubs is not going to work for the trees. It's either the trees get too much water or the shrubs don't get enough water. So it is better to plant them away from one another. And from a distance, it's not going to look much different. You're still going to think looking at it from a distance, you're going to think the shrubs are actually closer to the trees.
From an arborist perspective, what we'd love, what looks great to us is a tree with a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch, a proper amount of mulch underneath it and nothing else. Get it. These are beautiful too. And so it's finding a balance. Finding a balance in there, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about root barriers? We have this situation where, in parkways, there's always a concern about damage to parts of the sidewalks or maybe where street trees really don't offer shade because they're getting smaller and smaller to try to avoid that. I had read fairly recently that in Australia they're getting away from it. They decided that the root barriers really don't serve a purpose. What is the evolving thought on that?
I'm going to interject for one moment because I'd love to bring Brian up to be part of that answer and also Nick, and we'll just do kind of a quick informal panel. I know we've done some round robin questions, but maybe we can get you
definitely.
around your
Yeah.
But I want to, we've got beautiful food waiting for us, and I want to be able to share everybody. So maybe you guys can sit up here, or Sebastian, so you don't have to follow around. Trip over everything. We'll be captured on film.
We don't really like root barriers either. Silvacells are and it's a way to provide a structure underneath the pavement. Granted, it's also pretty expensive, but Keep La Mesa Beautiful, they had a really good example of that. I think they installed it last year, and so they're able to put these structures underneath the pavement, and it keeps the soil from compacting. You can actually create areas that the water can easily infiltrate. And when the roots are going where they're supposed to, they're not going back up towards the sidewalk, that's when you start having less issues. So ideally, a silva cell or a similar sort of structure like that.
Can you hear me if I yell?
Yeah, can we stop the mic? I think all three of us can definitely not use it. So.
And ideally, what he's talking about is limiting compaction. And decompaction on construction sites is ideal, but as you know, people track all over everything and compact the soil, which is what often you get surface roots. So surface roots is a function of genetics, soil conditions, and cultural practices, which means water. If you have no other alternative, and silva cells are good in structural soil, the jury's somewhat out, that is ideal, but if you have absolutely no alternative, linear barriers, not circular, but linears at a parkway are not the worst thing in the world if they're not so deep. So, you know, you have your gutter pan and your sidewalk on one side and the other. It doesn't have to go down 24 or 36 inches deep. Basically, what his research has shown is the roots go down, they come back up. Ideally, they come back up on the other side of the hardscape and on the other side of the gutter pan. Sidewalks expensive to fix, but it's not as expensive to fix as a gutter pan with a flow line. That's outrageous. Ed Gilman has the longest research study that's still going on linear root barriers. It's about 20 years now. And he found if they're not too deep and if everything's done right, the tree will anchor a root, not cause problems. But if you do the really deep ones and you have heavy clay soils, it can be an issue. So how you detail it, how it's installed, what your conditions are, I agree 100% that something like a silva cell, which is effectively limiting compaction, is more ideal. But should you have to use them, there is a better way to go about it that will do less damage and better anchoring for the plant. But in general, arborists don't tend to like them.
Marian's got a question back there. So many years ago, 25 years ago, because San Diego's soils were so compacted and zero percolation, our industry somehow did develop a detail that is a pure air standpipe. It was prior to any of the deep tube watering pipes. We're still in favor of using that because it gets air down into the lower root ball, and it was drilled oftentimes 3 feet below the bottom of the pit. So it moved the water that didn't move laterally, it moved that at least away from the rotting roots at the bottom of the pit. So I've had an arborist tell me, I think out of confusion, not to use any of that, but I would like to still get a several consensuses that in San Diego soils, which is very different than the soils in Los Angeles Basin or where you are, we have issues here.
They would vary within San Diego. I would say that it's probably different from one end of the parking lot to the other, depending on fill and where you actually got those soils. Construction soils vary based on grade a lot. There's not definitive research that shows that vertical pipe allows oxygen exchange in soil. The value that I think you might be seeing is once the plant is established, meaning you've got proper irrigation through the root zone, that you get some drainage off of the root ball so the plant is not losing water, probably more, at least in my opinion, more value than the oxygen exchange. Roots are they're gonna two things. They need water and oxygen. And the amount of oxygen that can be around that pipe is probably limited in the greater distance of what a root zone is on a large growing tree. Meaning, if you saw the tree protection zone, if
if you put a pipe this big around in front of an oak that has a root zone that's 60 feet wide, it's probably not going to move enough oxygen to be significant. But in a period of establishment, moving water around and keeping it off the root crown or not super saturated probably has a lot of value, potentially. And it's a good monitoring device. I'm working on a big project that has some drainage issues, and it lets us peek down there to see what the water's doing. And that has a lot of value.
Thank you.
All right, so if that's it, I think we'll thank our guests very much for donating their time and expertise. And then we are going to kind of move out onto the patio where I know Susie's going to raffle off some wonderful plants. And we got some great food and beverages out there.